Tyranny. You see, tell me if this fits. When the government leaders place their own interests or the interest of a small oligarchy over the best interests of the general population. Oligarchy basically is a small group of people that control the government. Big bankers, select politicians, they work together. Only a couple of hundred of them. And they make the decisions. There's a lot of people in this country right now that are convinced that it doesn't matter anymore who's elected. What was the difference between Clinton and Bush? I mean, by the end, when they finally got passed through, we got deeper in the hole. They spent us out of control. The guy we have now is just a lot more aggressive. He is definitely a socialist. And he's pushing us in that direction a lot faster than we ever went. But the 50 years before that, we were moving in that direction, just not as fast. The change is picking up. The pace is picking up. This is the common, people, there's a guy talking tonight to me about the health plan and stuff, and he said, you guys on the right. And I said, well, are you on the left? He says, well, health care, I think it's the greatest thing in the world. I said, well, that's your opinion, but how does that put me on the right? I mean, maybe there's 1 or 2 pages maybe that I could live with. The other 2,000 and something I can't. But when you look at left and right, communism basically is where the government owns everything. Communal farms. We're not there yet. But we're moving in that direction. Fascism, the government selects leaders. They control the big corporation. Even when Hitler was in his heyday in Germany, or Mussolini, there were big industrialists that were running these companies using their plan. They didn't give up their luxury. They worked with Hitler and Mussolini. Is there any relation? Is there any similarity? Do you see any of that stuff yet? Do we control General Motors, Chrysler? It is amazing that when the government runs it, though, they need more help. And Ford doesn't take any help, and they're doing fine. But that's the difference. Rather than communism controls everything, runs the farms, in fascism, they pick the bosses. And we know this president fired the chairman of General Motors and replaced him with somebody he thought was better. That's fascism. We own a lot of stock in companies. We own a lot of bad paper. Well, you do. You get your dividends yet? No, you sure? Yeah, probably won't see any of them. This is more accurate. This is why I use it. If you look at it more, no matter which way you go, if you go more to the left, you lose your liberty. If you go the same amount of distance to the right, you're going to lose your liberty. Sometimes the right, in the name of being conservative, takes your rights away too. To protect you, of course, but they take them away. So you got to be aware that you can go just as bad to the right as you can to the left and lose your rights. If you want your rights and you want to believe in liberty, that's right in the center. So it's just a different way of looking at left and right. You're on the left, you're on the right. Just a little bit of different way of looking at it. How long or how far are we along in this country to implementing the 10 major points of the Communist Manifesto written by Karl Marx back in 1848? Let's just see for a minute. Abolition of private property rights, eminent domain type issues. Now, Connecticut, right? Kelo versus New London. This guy was sitting at a nice couple of acres on the water, been in his family 100 years, little house, didn't get much, the town didn't get much in taxes, so they instituted an eminent domain proceeding. They took his property that's been in his family for 100 years and gave it to a developer simply because they could make more in taxes. It went to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said, oh, that's fine. So we have a Supreme Court that's not going along with the law either. Now, in New York City, at the end of 2009, the case was just finished. It's called Atlantic Yards. A bunch of people lived in condos over the Atlantic Yards, the subway lines. And it was a nice area. You had views. It was, most of the area is 2 or 3 stories at most. But they had these big condominiums or co-ops. People paid $400,000 or $500,000 for these apartments. The city of New York came along with help from the state of New York and condemned all that stuff. And who did they give it to? A fellow by the name of Ratner, which is very appropriate in this particular case. A big political contributor to the mayor. I think he owns the Nets. Might own the basketball Nets, I'm not sure. So they kicked all of these American citizens out, took their property and some of them actually got less than they paid for their apartments, and gave that land to a developer. That is so far out of the Constitution. It's unconstitutional. They went to New York State, all the way to the Court of Appeals. That's the decision was made in, I think, November or December. And the Court of Appeals said, oh, that's fine. No problem. The federal court refused to hear it. What do? Now you got the courts, supposed to be the last resort for your constitutional guaranteed rights, and they don't care. So the courts are as bad as the rest of the other 2 branches. So they're not going to help us at all. Okay, heavy progressive tax. Who wants to pay more taxes? Nobody? The average in the United States is about 50% of your income goes to taxes. In New York State, it's about 63%. You don't even realize it. You've got school taxes, town taxes, county taxes, a state income tax, a federal income tax, gas tax, cigarette tax. There's a lot of taxes. Death tax, even a funeral tax. So if you're going to go in a box, you're going to have to pay tax. They're going to get you anyway. We're paying too much. The income tax is totally unconstitutional. The Constitution says that the people shall not be taxed for their labor. How much clearer can that be? So if you work for somebody and you get a check, they're not supposed to take that out. The Income Tax Amendment, there's a lot of questions about how that was passed. A lot of questions. And if you look at the legislation from each state, it's different. It's supposed to be exactly the same wording. Even commas. It's not. Yet we have the income tax. And we're going to have 16,500 new IRS agents to administer your health plan. IRS is going to run the health plan. They're going to tie your bank accounts, your employee records, your tax records, all into one big pile. You will pay your bill because they'll take it right out of your checking account. And 16,500 IRS agents just to enforce the requirements of the health bill. It's outrageous. Another couple of threads across the body of America, piece by piece.